So you feel like roommates instead of partners. You're fine. You're not arguing. There's no big drama. You're just more like a house share. You do your jobs, they do theirs. You sort of circle around each other, but you're no longer partners. That doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to disconnect so thoroughly that you no longer feel like you're part of the same team. And there are lots of reasons this happens, and it happens a lot. Life takes over. The admin of being a parent or running a house or a stressful job. All these things that you can do independently of each other that just pushes you away. And then there's the unspoken resentments, the death of 1,000 eye rolls. The thing that instead of actually confronting, because it's so small and you don't want to cause an argument, you just roll your eyes and carry on. But all of those times that small resentment goes unspoken, gets swept under the rug, they add up. They don't disappear. They stay there in your unconscious mind as another time you were let down. And then there's the emotional avoidance. You don't want to talk about what's going on. It doesn't feel safe to talk about what's going on. This isn't how you work. One of you tries to have a conversation, the other one shuts it down. You don't want to be a nag. You want them to understand. Why can't they understand? You've told them that maybe you'd be more interested in having sex if they'd helped you out with the housework. Guess what happens? There's an eye roll. Their resentment's building too. So the questions here are not, is it okay or is it normal? Because yes, it is normal, but is it inevitable? No. Is it fixable? It can be. So the question, as always, comes back to you. How am I not showing up in this relationship? What am I not saying? What am I holding back? Because if you are holding things back, if you have those unspoken resentments, they will only grow and they will show up in the relationship in all sorts of ways that can be very unexpected. So what do you need to do? You need to get honest. Now, that sounds super easy, right? But if it doesn't feel safe to be honest, if that's not something that you have nurtured together, it can be really tricky. So the language you use can be super important, but also having clear boundaries. Now, when we set boundaries, a lot of people think that's a punishment, that's drawing a line in the sand, but it isn't. It's about protecting yourself, because let's talk about the intimacy. If we're saying that we feel like roommates, the chances are that means we're not having sex. So when we think about intimacy, it's really important to have boundaries, because boundaries protect your emotional safety. So you don't need to have sex in order to meet their needs if actually it's disrespecting your own. So being really clear about, look, I need emotional connection and intimacy in order to have sex. And I'm not going to have sex if I don't feel emotionally connected. And that needs to be respected. But if this is all new, it's going to take a little bit of time to get on the same page and help each other understand each other's point of view, because I think that's what's really important here as well, is it needs to be two-way conversation. It isn't just a case of you saying, this is where I'm at. You absolutely need to do that, and you need to hold your boundaries, but you also need to hear what's going on for them, because that's how, when we use collaborative conflict, we can actually come to a solution together. So you need to be honest about what's going on. You need to have that difficult conversation, because something we can often do is ignore all the little things, avoid all those small, uncomfortable conversations, and what we're left with is a really big, uncomfortable conversation. But ultimately, it still needs to happen. There needs to be that conversation, that discussion that's really honest and open. Then have the boundaries. Be really clear about what you need from intimacy. Now, with boundaries, there's a whole piece I cover on the Power of One. We have a whole week on boundaries, including some examples around intimacy. But With boundaries, it's about understanding what you're protecting, understanding what the boundary is, and then defining the consequence. So, one of those consequences could be intimacy is completely off the table until I feel like I'm respected. Or when you punish me for saying no, I feel unsafe emotionally. So there's lots of language, because sex, money and religion, we know these are things that people find very difficult to talk about and don't always have the skills, but that doesn't mean we avoid it. It means we go into this with curiosity. As always, lead with curiosity. How are you feeling about our sex life right now? Because I'm feeling really disconnected and I want to see how we can come back to being connected. So be honest, have boundaries, and be intentional. Sex shouldn't feel like a chore. It shouldn't feel like another thing on the to-do list. It should feel like a way that you come together and you connect and you feel seen and heard and supported. It shouldn't be a chore. So helping your partner to understand your perspective whilst also staying super curious about theirs. That's how you can then get to a point of collaboration and figuring out a way forward together. Because if you are currently roommates, the way to move through is not to become better roommates. It's to look at how you can intentionally become partners again. But stay true to your boundaries. I am not suggesting for 1 second that you remove your physical intimacy boundaries and you start having sex in order to build connection. The connection has to come first for most, particularly women. But it's about you. What do you need in order to want to have that intimacy again? Or if you're the person that wants it and your partner doesn't, what do they need to feel that connection? Now, there's always a degree of varying sex drives, that kind of thing. And actually in the notes, I'm going to link you to a podcast episode that talks a little bit more about intimacy that I think you might find really useful around different sex drives and stuff like that. So I will link you into that as well. It's not my podcast, but I still think it's a really good episode to listen to. But ultimately, if you are living like roommates, the chances are life has got in the way. Resentment is growing and you are avoiding the emotional connection that you need. So get honest, be really clear on your boundaries and consequences, and get intentional about what you want your relationship to look and feel like. And what does your partner want your relationship to look and feel like? And then together, you've got a much better chance of working your way through it. I hope that is helpful. As I said, I've got a whole section on this area in The Power of One. So please do get in touch if you would like to find out more about it. Again, I'll pop the link in the comments. But if you found this useful, do subscribe. And if you have any specific questions you'd like me to do a video on, then let me know.